I'm going to switch over. I'm also doing a 5-minute lightning round on VSTS. So you can also use tools. CodeFresh was one of the tools for CI/CD that we talked about. But you don't have to use CodeFresh, right? There's a ton of different tools. There's Jenkins, there's CodeShip, there's Travis CI. CodeShip, I know, got bought by CloudBees. Then there's also, of course, VSTS. One of the things that is shocking, perhaps, to people is you can actually use VSTS, which is Microsoft Visual Team Studios, Team Services, sorry, to build Mac, Linux, or Windows applications. So we actually give you build servers that are Mac build servers. So here's a project. I'm no smoke and mirrors. I'm in my own Microsoft Test Visual Studio subscription. Here's my Mac OS build project. I can click on builds, and I'll see actually 3 different build pipelines that I have. You don't have to have 3 different ones. I do it because it's very visual and easy to see as soon as this loads. So you can see I have Mac, I have Linux, I have Windows. You can also have one pipeline that has phases that does all 3 steps. So if you do work in an environment where you have to support your developers that are building Mac applications and also Linux, but then you also have some random Windows team over here, you can set up one pipeline to handle all 3 environments. So let's take a look, for example, at the Mac one. Now, I already have the definition set up right here. So I click down from the definition page. If I were to hover over and hit edit, I'm going to get sent into this next page. And this next page, you'll notice on the left, I have essentially a task runner. But before I show you the tasks I've defined, I'm going to go ahead and fire off a build, and I'm going to hit Q. So there's going to be a live build that's going to happen while I'm on stage. I'm going to scroll up to the top here from this task runner. So you can see it says tasks. If I hit process, this is where I'm defining the build process, right? So I can define the name. And on agent queue, I can see the agent I'm using. Now, an agent is a build server, a build computer that either you own or we give you. You can have your own private agent, but we also have public agents available for free for you to run your builds on. So if I choose the agent queue, I can drop it down, and I can choose hosted, Windows, Linux, Mac, or Visual Studio 2017. So for this, since I'm obviously doing a Xamarin build or a Mac build, I'm going to go ahead and leave it as a Mac server, Mac queue. For get sources, I can give it code from anywhere. VSTS does have Git repositories, and obviously, as everyone I'm sure has now found out, we bought GitHub 2 days ago. I found out when everyone else did. So you can also use GitHub, which is still going to be its own entity. But you can choose your sources or wherever you want. You can even do any external Git if you did want to do GitLab or Bitbucket. We don't care. Bring your code from wherever, and we'll still build it. Then you set up essentially your phase or your task runner, right? So this is where you can see it's literally called agent phase. I can have more than one phase, as I mentioned. And on the agent queue under phase, I can say either inherit from the definition, which is the master, or I could specify I want this phase to be Linux, and this phase to be Mac, and this phase to be Windows. And now, essentially, I'm just having different tasks. I can tell it to install the certificate. I upload my certificates encrypted. I have even an environment variable for my password for the certificate. I assign it keychain information. Since obviously I am using a hosted server, I'm sure there's going to be security concerns. I can tell it to use a provisioning profile, but also remove that profile after build. By default, it will anyway, but just for additional security and peace of mind, we have that box to check. You can also replace all your tokens for your iOS builds. You do your usual commands. And when I say that this is a task runner, I can run any task I want. So there's already a suite of different tasks that we give you, including App Center Distribute, App Center Test. If I publish or if I start typing in App Store, there's even the Apple App Store task as well. So you essentially set up all the tasks, and then it runs through and builds your application. And just to show you it's legitimately building, I'm going to open that build in a new tab. And we can see by now it should be finished. Oh, it's still building. Sometimes this will take about 3 minutes, but you can see it's running through. It initialized the job. It already got all the sources. It's now fully building. It'll copy the files. Since I know we don't have a great deal of time, because again, it is a 5-minute session, I do have the build that I did earlier today set up here, so you can see it was able to fully build. I can go back and I can look at any of the logs, see what happened. I can get any code coverage results. I can build a Mac application using a Microsoft product. I can also, like I said earlier, do the same thing for Linux. So if I wanted to queue off a new Linux build, should already queue off. Yeah, so queue new build. And if I go into the Docker, Linux Docker, it's going to build a Docker image, which then I can actually even use with Kubernetes, right? So let me go ahead and edit this, just so you can see what the tasks look like, and then we'll wrap it up. But the tasks, I'm just telling it to use .NET Core. I'm telling it to do the standard restore, build, publish commands, build an image, push an image. And even if I'm, again, not a developer, not the one coding, I can set these tasks in this pipeline up, and then when my developers and my employees at the company use it, they push it to whatever the repository is, it'll fire off that build and then choose to release it into whatever environment. So then I'm able to set up my developers for success to, as we talked about what the definition of DevOps is, deliver continuous delivery of value. So I can make sure they're able to continuously deliver value without having to worry about me becoming the bottleneck. So that's a quick demo of that. Again, I'll leave this slide up for if you have any questions, and then I know I have to turn this session over to whoever is next. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Any questions? Anybody? Whoa.
I know there's a lot of information in here. I'm more than happy to go more in depth. It's really hard to cover this kind of material in short periods of time. But again, the session was intended to get you thinking. Even the Linux and Mac demo, there's actually a 10-minute version of that recorded on Channel 9 where I'm doing the same stuff and I'll show you how to set it up. So if you want to walk through that a little bit more at your own time, there's recordings online. And then I think you did raise your hand.
So is the last thing you showed, the Visual Studio, you said it was called Visual Studio Team Services?
Yes, VSTS.
Is that a, I'm assuming that scales to a paid model. Is that a subscription for just Visual Studio or?
No, so it's separate from Visual Studio. You can have, if you wanted to use something on-prem, they have a Team Foundation server, which is TFS. But VSTS, I think it gives you like, I don't want to quote this and be wrong, but I think it's like 100 and something builds per month or something for free. When you start exceeding the builds, then you have to pay for it. But you don't have to provide a credit card or anything to get started. And even, by the way, if you wanted to get started with Kubernetes, I completely forgot to mention this because this is new. If you wanted to get started with Kubernetes and VSTS and Helm without having to really know how to configure and wire all of this up yourself, if I can have just 2 minutes just to show you, since you asked that, you can even create a VSTS account all for free. We have what's called the AKS Devops Project. It's in Azure, so if you sign up for Azure, you use the $200 worth of free credits, you would log into what's called your Azure portal, so we'll wait for that to log in. And in the top left, which you'll see as soon as this logs me in, you have a little plus sign where you can choose to create essentially a new project, and you would choose to create the Devops Project. When you walk through that, you can choose any application of your choice, whether that's Python, Java, .NET Core. And I'll show you real quick. So I'll click on the plus sign, scroll down. We have DevOps Project. This will create your Kubernetes cluster for you. This will create a VSTS account if you don't have one. It'll set it up with a project pre-configured with all the tasks added in, even for Helm deployment. And then you can choose to, okay, you have that phase for your Helm and Kubernetes deployment for Linux containers. You can add in another phase to also handle your Mac builds and have that push out to your iOS applications, and then also down to Windows. You can get really granular. But for example, let's take Java. Haven't tested Java with Kubernetes, but we'll choose Spring Framework. And right here you see select the Azure service to deploy the application. So I want to do a Kubernetes service, but I don't have one. It's going to set one up for me. So I hit next, and down here is where it says Visual Studio Team Services. Do I want to use an existing account or do I want to create new? So I enter in MacDevOpsYVR for new. That exists. I enter in the project name, call it the same thing. Scroll down again. I choose the subscription where I want it to be, the cluster name, the location. It's going to, by default, do a standard pricing tier, and I would hit done, which I'll do right now while here, and it's literally creating everything for me. It'll create my CI/CD, it'll create my application, it gives me everything I need to get started. So if I go back over to here, I have to remember what the name of my, I think it's this one. Oh, nope, you know what? It's already right there on the homepage. I'm going to show you what the DevOps project looks like, what it gives you. And I'll zoom out of this so you can see a little bit better. But by the way, it'll also set up, so we talked about monitoring. That's the one thing I didn't dive deep into because I didn't have a great deal of time. But if you want to know if you're delivering value, or if you want to know that your applications or your containers are running, or what the telemetry is, we announced this, it's called, it's a preview right now, but Azure Kubernetes Service Health Monitoring, we even give you application insights into your server requests and your containers. So on the left-hand side, you can see all the code. That sets up all of my CI/CD pipeline down even to release. These are deep links back over to VSTS. So if I open that up into a new tab, I can see the pipeline that was fully set up for the DevOps project. Again, on a brand new, I didn't have Kubernetes, I didn't have VSTS, all I had was an Azure subscription. I didn't even have to set up, so you'll notice the build, it's building an image, it's pushing an image, it's installing Helm, it's initializing Helm, it's packaging up, it's publishing it, it's setting up the best practices for you to learn. So that's something brand new we just announced in May. And you also get like your rich information. So I hope that answers your question and probably gives you a little bit more information.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica.